campaign advisor James Carville told the Arkansas governor to think about one thing more than any other when on the campaign trail. He even posted a sign in the campaign quarters that included the phrase, "The economy, stupid." As we discussed in the last episode, the early 90s was under the slump of recession. Clinton emphasized the importance of the economy to his advantage during his quest for the presidency, and it would remain a key feature of his administration. Clinton reappointed Reagan's chairman pick for the Federal Reserve, Alan Greenspan. In private, they agreed to placate financial markets by sacrificing a stimulus package by cutting spending and raising taxes to stop long-term interest rates from rising. Clinton also continued the previous administration's trend of deregulation, including in consumer arenas like credit and housing loans, stuff we'd come to regret later. But let's focus on the 90s, baby, the roaring 90s. Whereas in past decades, America heavily relied on manufacturing and exporting goods, the 90s saw the rise of the information economy, exporting lifestyles, ideas, information, and entertainment. Explained Fortune magazine when discussing America's soft power. Around the globe, folks just can't get enough of America. They may not want our hardware anymore, our cars, steel, or television sets, but when they want a jolt of popular culture, and they want more all the time, they increasingly turn to American software, our movies, music, TV programming, and home video, which together now account for an annual trade surplus of some $8 billion. Only aerospace, aircraft, and related equipment outranks pop culture as an export. Like it or not, Mickey Mouse, Michael Jackson, and Madonna, her overseas sales are 2.5 times her domestic numbers, prop up what's left of our balance of trade. American executives who had long been trying to appeal to domestic youth were also tapping into the global youth market. An 18-year-old in Denmark has more in common with an 18-year-old in France than either has with elders in their own country, said the then CEO of 3-year-old MTV Europe, which at the time attracted approximately 20 million viewers. At the center of this storm of technology, media, and soft power was a celebrity culture on steroids. I've discussed the history of American celebrity in this video, by the way, but it's time for a 90s deep dive. Hollywood and the parallel music industry were old economic forces, creating and sustaining hundreds of thousands of jobs. Stylists, directors, production crews, journalists, lawyers, publicists, caterers, etc., and generating billions in revenue. But in the 90s, budgets swelled as more U.S. companies began making astronomical sums outside of the country. The American music business, for instance, collected 70% of its revenue from foreign audiences. As for film, it was the one truly international movie business. No country had a more ubiquitous film industry that exported its values, propaganda, and stereotypes. And the money spent to make American films outpaced other countries. Said Forbes, the average American film cost 15 million euros, was nearly 100% privately financed, grossed 58 million euros, and reached 10.5 million persons. The world of the A-list celebrity, lucrative to everyone involved, was an important tool for continuing U.S. influence in a globalized world. At the same time, the media conglomerates who profited from celebrity memorabilia, appearances, scandals, royalties, and even deaths consolidated their power and diversified their holdings for maximum control of mainstream coverage. Thanks to the 1996 Telecommunications Act, which deregulated media and lowered competition. Disney, for example, bought the ABC network. Paramount's owner Viacom bought CBS, and General Electric, owner of NBC, bought Universal. Open secrets of abuse and exploitation would go unmitigated because the money flow was too good. For instance, Disney bought the film company Miramax from Harvey and Bob Weinstein, who stayed on to run the company.
I do all my movies for Harvey Weinstein. That's Miramax for all of you. Yeah. And I'm lucky to do them there, but he will coerce you to do it.
And so Harvey said, I tell you what, go on and talk about your movie. Is that what Harvey said?
That clip from 1998 was the earliest public critique of Harvey Weinstein that David Letterman just breezed through. But of course, Weinstein and others would go unpunished for years because of the money that Hollywood generated. Celebrities were lucrative products important to the domestic and global economies, often primed for deification in front of the cameras and exploitation behind the scenes. The profitability of the world of sports was fictionalized in the hit movie Jerry Maguire.
Show me the money.
But we don't don't have to look to fiction to understand the true scope of the power of sports. In 1990, the $60 million Nike Just Do It campaign was a worldwide force, paired with ads starring Spike Lee and Michael Jordan, who was also an ambassador for Gatorade and many other brands. Though Mike had been paid $500,000 per year for the first 5 years of Nike endorsements, he had signed another contract for at least $20 million in 1989. The relationship between Nike Incorporated and the Chicago Bulls icon was mutually beneficial. His endorsement of the popular shoes had a $10 billion impact on the economy and highlighted the global capitalism ushered in after the fall of the USSR, the establishment of the World Trade Organization in 1995, which streamlined trade, and the beginning of NAFTA. Labor activists and other critics of globalization opposed the World Trade Organization and NAFTA, knowing that poorer developing countries like Mexico or El Salvador, whose advantage in the global economy was cheap labor, would be exploited. If these places enacted higher labor standards or demanded higher wages for workers, they would repel companies to other countries with cheaper labor. As a result, Mexico didn't benefit from NAFTA the way America and Canada did. As detailed by Walter Lefebvre, developing countries, including previously communist ones, became important and exploited labor forces, especially in Asia, where shoes cost as little as $5.60 to make before being slapped with a $70 to $150 price tag. In the process, Nike eliminated 65,000 American jobs by relying on unregulated sweatshop labor. I think it's safe to say that no athlete before Michael Jordan had as much of an impact on the world. He set the bar for not only talent, but for sports wealth, and further cemented America's toxic love affair with black athletes. Of course, Nike and Michael Jordan wouldn't be the only ones benefiting from the new global capitalism. By 1998, 11 million people were employed worldwide to make clothes, and another 18 million worked in textiles and footwear, supplying goods for a flourishing fashion industry. Most were underpaid and unprotected, including another estimated 435,000 sweatshop workers in New York City and Los Angeles alone. In 1995, it was reported that 72 Thai people were being enslaved in El Monte, California, working 17 to 22 hours a day, and that the owners of the sweatshop were a Chinese Thai family. They were watched under armed guard, not allowed to socialize, and they were kept isolated from the outside world while being forced to repay a never-ending debt. The clothes they made went to 11 major companies that had stores like Anchor Blue and Miller's Outpost, and they claimed to know nothing about the sweatshops. The companies did, however, pay $3.7 million to the 150 workers who had been enslaved at one point since 1988. Let's pull out our calculators. 3.7 million divided by 150. They got roughly $24,666 apiece. To make matters worse, for 9 whole days, the workers had been treated like prisoners and made to wear orange jumpsuits after being rescued from the sweatshop. Charles Kernigan was the leader of the National Labor Committee in support of worker and human rights in Central America. He had helped expose the Gap sweatshop practices. In 1996, Kathy Lee Gifford was a popular TV show host, making an alleged $9 million a year by licensing her name on clothing sold at Wal-Mart. During congressional testimony, Kernigan, who had exposed other companies like the Gap, alleged that Wal-Mart employed Honduran girls as young as 13 to make the Gifford clothing for 31 cents an hour for 75 hours a week. The girls were also subject to sexual assault and harassment. This was many Americans' introduction to the concept of sweatshop labor, cried Kathy Lee Gifford on Live with Regis and Kathy Lee.
And I truly resent this man impugning my integrity. You can say I'm ugly, you can say I'm not talented, but when you say I don't care about children and that I will exploit them for some sort of monetary gain, for once, mister, you better answer your phone because my attorney is calling you today. How dare you?
The Labor Department had roughly 800 inspectors who were expected to monitor 6 million work sites. Kathy Lee said she had no idea about the sweatshop labor and blamed Walmart. She then became a sweatshop crusader and quickly cleaned up her image. Said Kernigan, she hadn't a clue about how this industry operated. But now, I bet she'll make Walmart clean up its act. It confirms what I've always said. When people hear these stories face to face, there is no other response than decency and concern. LL Bean, Reebok, Nike, Gifford, and others formed a coalition to address the issues and create a code of conduct, with little change. In the years to come, more Kathie Lee Gifford merch was reported to be made with sweatshop labor, this time in New York. Gifford's scandal put other celebrity influencers under the microscope, though none decided to take on the sweatshop issue the way she did. Said Michael Jordan, "I don't know the complete situation. Why should I? I'm trying to do my job. Hopefully, Nike will do the right thing." Nike worked overtime to refresh its public image after sweatshop allegations in Pakistan and Cambodia, but abuses would continue.
But consumers and large corporations are still seeking deep bargains from workers around the world.
So the bargain the American people think they're getting at Wal-Mart may be no bargain at all, because it's taken standards down all over the world. It's not raising standards as they promised us, it's slashing standards all across the world.
Hungry shoe collectors, fashionistas, and hoarders with money to burn supplied the demand. Also, the protection and deification of ubiquitous athletes and celebrities who endorsed the lucrative products that were benefiting the American economy became even more paramount than before. Protecting them and the multi-billion-dollar brands they worked with was imperative to preserving the economy. Under mounting public scrutiny, some subcontractors for companies like JCPenney's and Victoria's Secret turned from cheap foreign labor to cheap domestic prison labor. But more on the lucrative prison industry later. In December 1999, 45,000 protesters assembled to denounce the World Trade Organization before a scheduled conference in Seattle, citing labor and environmental concerns. Several businesses were destroyed by anonymous people in black outfits en masse, with specific corporations like The Gap targeted for its human rights abuses. Pat Buchanan called alleged violence by protesters deplorable, but supported destroying the WTO. In response, Seattle officials mobilized a National Guard and imposed a curfew as the riots raged for 4 days. Anarchists and leftists viewed the protests as a success because the mass unrest forced mainstream media to report on why there was opposition to the WTO, but predicted a former Bush advisor, "I doubt the politics of radical nostalgia will prevail in a country where the most popular TV show is Who Wants to Be a Millionaire."
I don't really need your help, but I just wanted to let you know that I'm going to win the $1 million.
He's won $1 million.
Wealth had never been positioned as so attainable. The early 90s had seen a drop in the total of the world's billionaires, with counts staying below 500 for the duration of the decade. But more and more would be created, and they'd reach new levels of wealth. In 1995, beginning a streak that would last until 2017, except for 2 single years, Bill Gates was crowned by Forbes to be the richest person in the world. 1995 was the same year Microsoft launched the insanely popular software Windows 95.
It was a star-studded launch in London tonight, even if the celebrities were fakes. Appropriate, perhaps, since some say Windows 95 is simply Microsoft catching up with the product developed by Apple in the mid-80s. But that hasn't stopped Microsoft becoming the giant of the computer world and Bill Gates the richest man in America.
Subsequent launches would cause consumer frenzies. Computer software market by giving away Internet Explorer for free to spite Netscape, possibly violating the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890. Microsoft was ruled to be an unconstitutional monopoly, leading to a change in Microsoft's business tactics, but the court hearings exposed Gates as a shrewd and tactical billionaire businessman, much different from his PR-crafted lovable nerd image. Now, while Bill Gates' billions seemed out of reach, becoming a millionaire seemed much more attainable. And after 1995, there was a whole new crop of them. Approximately 3% of the American population were millionaires, and many were making their fortunes on the World Wide Web. In 1990, Tim Berners-Lee had been working on the World Wide Web as a new way to connect the internet, which had been around since 1983, and the first web page was written in November. In 1991, the World Wide Web was switched on, and by January 1993, there were 50 web servers across the world, and by October, there were over 500. Because it would aid the economy and create jobs, Clinton encouraged and facilitated the internet's growth in America by endorsing computer education in school, providing free internet to schools and libraries, and upgrading internet infrastructure. By 1998, there were 3 million registered domains on the World Wide Web, and it was estimated that the net was growing by 1.5 million web pages every day. It was hard to find what you were looking for. Numerous primitive search engines and databases attempted to make make the web easier to navigate. For instance, Netscape Navigator launched in 1994, along with Yahoo. Netscape would be purchased and absorbed by AOL's walled garden internet browsing in 1998. Jeff Bezos founded Amazon in 1994, originally as an online book marketplace, with a $250,000 loan supplied by his parents. He launched in 1995, the same year that Craig Newmark founded Craigslist, and internet commercialization became viable, ushering in the dot-com boom. Flush with investment cash and overconfidence, internet-based companies popped up like weeds. In San Francisco and New York, Silicon Valley and Alley churned out a series of companies that would spawn imitators and change the fabric of the country. Some were chasing IPO launches worth millions, or buyouts by major players, like when Microsoft bought Hotmail for $400 million in 1997. However, it must be said the earliest pioneers of internet commercialization were porn sites. We'll come back to one of the first internet porn pioneers, Danny Ash, in episode 5, but by 1999, internet porn was a $1 billion industry, with XXX pages getting 50 million hits a month. So yes, the internet was booming. Up to 39% of all venture capital investments went to internet companies by 1999, which aided the overall NASDAQ stock market index. Dot-com companies spent big money on branding and advertising, even though there often was no profit or even revenue. Take for instance Pets.com, an online pet supply company that launched in November 1998, partially with Amazon funding, and it recorded less than $700,000 in revenue while spending close to $12 million on advertising alone during its first fiscal year. This included 1 million magazines sent to pet owners' homes and a $1.2 million 30-second ad during the 1999 Super Bowl, and promoting its Puppet Puppy everywhere. It established an IPO in 2000 and liquidated less than a year later. Not all websites, of course, failed. For instance, Google was launched by Larry Page and Sergey Brin in 1998. The next year, it was reported that the richest 200 Americans' net worth topped $1 trillion, and 4 of the top 10 were in computers. While the dot-com bubble would burst completely by 2002, according to Diana Palutiter, between September 1999 and July 2000, insiders at dot-com companies cashed out $43 billion, twice the rate of 1997 and 1998. Additionally, before the bubble burst, telecom companies managed to raise $1.6 trillion on Wall Street and invest more than $500 billion into laying fiber optic cable, adding new switches, and building wireless networks. The 80 million miles of fiber optic cable replaced copper wiring and would make internet cheaper and easier to access in the future. Additionally, the booming Wall Street economy was crucial to New York. Half of the city's increase in income between 1992 and 1997 came from the less than 5% of people working in the financial service industry. For the roaring 90s of the Clinton economy, things seemed to be going great. Once regional companies like Starbucks were expanding, at the start of the decade, there were approximately 1,650 independent coffee shops nationwide and 84 Starbucks in the American Northwest. Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz wanted to cultivate a third haven in a secularized America, and the company launched its IPO in 1992. 2 years later, there were 425 Starbucks stores nationwide, and the first drive-thru, and there were 1,000 locations by 1996.
It's still dark when the doors open at Starbucks, and there are people waiting for coffee.
It's just part of the morning ritual.
It's the habit of the 90s, the Starbucks stop.
Regular habit.
Every morning.
It's just a habit.
It's become a habit.
And they get drinks with names like
personal double tall non-fat cappuccino,
decaf tall non-fat no whip extra hot mocha.
What?
Decaf tall non-fat no whip extra hot mocha.
People actually know what those names mean.
And by 1999, there were 2,500 Starbucks stores across the nation, and coffee culture boomed as a result. Snooty coffee shops, drive-through coffee shops, and indie coffee shops became more common. As for already established companies, their impact on cities and culture was made evident by Disney and New York City. After spending the 80s focusing on merchandising and theme parks, Disney started the decade with 50 stores. More would follow to accommodate the merchandise flowing from the Disney Renaissance, spitting out classics like The Little Mermaid, Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, The Lion King, Pocahontas, Hercules, and Mulan. Award-winning music and celebrity voice actors brought in the big bucks. Disney's TV and radio outlets became more popular as cable channels began shifting Disney TV to basic cable packages instead of premium. And in 1994, it finally released its 1937 classic film Snow White from the vault, leading to 25 million total sales by the next year. To further flex its muscles, Disney established a master plan community named Celebration in Florida, embodying new urbanism with its walkable streets and hyper suburbia with its strict rules. Celebration promised to be the community of tomorrow. Wrote Tarpley hit, "In Celebration, there were no fast casual franchises, no hulking commercial trucks, no visual reminders of poverty. Every lawn was cut to code, every fence was freshly painted. Litter had a lifespan of 15 seconds. Buildings from the post office to the movie theater were designed by the 1980s best architects." In 1996, New York's Times Square completed its transition from seedy haven of sex workers and drugs to family-friendly hub of consumerism when Disney opened its flagship store. Viacom opened up studios for MTV and Nick too. Disney also invested in the ailing Broadway sector with a deal brokered under David Dinkins to buy and repair the New Amsterdam Theater, which brought other businesses like AMC and Madame Tussauds. And of course, fancy condos sprung up to house people who could enjoy the new shopping, restaurants, and services.
I always like to think of myself as selling the clothes and telling the buyers and the magazine editors, buy this or put it on the cover of your magazine, pay attention to this is it.
Fashion was a hardcore industry that attracted many different demographics. And for middle Americans, the clothing available at malls was more abundant than ever.
Bargains are coming! The bargains are coming! Hear ye, hear ye! The mother of all shopping crowds was waiting as the doors opened.
Yes, shop till you drop. We are professional shoppers.
When the $650 million Mall of America opened in Minnesota in 1992, it was the largest in the country and surrounded by 4 other major malls in nearby cities. But it stood out for its roller coaster, nightclubs, 14-screen movie theater, and a parking structure of 13,000 free slots. Ray Charles was paid $50,000 to sing America during the grand opening. 1 million shoppers came in the first week alone, sampling everything from Wolfgang Puck Pizza to Bloomingdale's.
Some people came just to look. This California man says he likes taking pictures of cultural icons.
And this is really one of them. This is a high water mark of where we're going.
Said one real estate analyst, "I hate to say this, but I think it's doomed to fail. I think everyone is shocked that the mall's backers actually went through with this. But I guess you can't back off when you're half pregnant." Though critics wondered about the debut of a mall during a recession, it flourished when the economy bounced back. When not shopping for the latest fashions, people were coveting surround sound systems with $2,000 big screen TVs that sat on the floor and weighed hundreds of pounds, popular computers like 1998's iMac G3, which saved Apple from financial destruction and fit perfectly in the long-gone family computer rooms, and $200 to $300 Sony PlayStations. After 1996, movie-loving consumers could be enticed by the new DVD format, which promised better quality and extra content. If you were lucky and wealthy, you could get your hands on the AT&T $1,500 video phone, or the Motorola StarTAC, the first popular mobile flip phone rolled out in 1996. 2 years later, the number of cell phone subscribers passed 60 million, up from just 1.6 million in 1988. There were all kinds of products for every budget because Americans were in the midst of a consumerism craze. Buying in bulk at Costco's, BJ's, Sam's Club, and other wholesale warehouse clubs was all the rage too. Reported the Washington Post in 1990, "I love the feeling I get shopping here," said a shopper, pushing a cart filled with a bulk bag of chicken wings, a 24-pack of toilet paper, a case of soda, and a small television for her son's birthday. It's like you're getting in on the bottom floor of things. Think about the synergy happening. Imagine buying a Happy Meal featuring a toy from a movie that you saw in the theaters. On the way home from the theater, you might hear a song from the movie on the radio. So you make plans to stop by the mall and buy the soundtrack. If you were one of the 47 million Americans who could hop online thanks to a 40% drop in computer prices in 1997, you'd go to forums like an AOL chat room to look for reviews or talk about the movie with online commentators, who then suggested other must-see movies. And before bed, you'd watch a celebrity infotainment show or read one of the dozens of entertainment and lifestyle magazines that divulge details about actors from the movie, adding to your fandom. Soon enough, their fashion choices, lifestyles, and careers become secondhand knowledge, as secondhand as civics and more relevant than geopolitics. Claimed in 1999 op-ed, it's an existence defined by an endless loop of media, by the internet, advertising, network television, cable television, radio, movies, movie trailers, newspapers, magazines, zines, video games, music video, compact discs, cell phones, palm tops, email, instant messaging, and distance learning. Importantly, this endless loop provided endless products, increasingly suited to individual tastes and preferences. On one hand, this meant more representation and individual choice, but it also reflected the divisions in American society and fueled this global, worldwide consumerist beast. While mainstream American media promoted a celebrity and consumerist culture that improved the average American's view of wealth porn, in the process creating quality return customers whose wallets could always be activated with special editions, reboots, and nostalgia, the pernicious nature of poverty bubbled underneath. For instance, the cleaning up of New York, particularly through Times Square revitalization, would come at a number of costs we'll get into in the next episode. But notably, higher rents for renovated single-room occupancy buildings that attracted wealthier residents. Entire neighborhoods converted to high-priced condos and co-ops. Rent had already been on the rise by 5 to 7% since 1992, but in 1994, when the median rent was $600 or $1,217 in today's money, the city council voted to implement vacancy decontrol. Because landlords couldn't just destroy the 1969 rent stabilization program, they lobbied for vacancy decontrol, which allowed them to escape regulation and charge market rates once tenants moved out of apartments that cost at least $2,000 a month. Landlords made pricey renovations to drive up rent and made conditions displeasing to get tenants to vacate. By the end of the 90s, tens of thousands of units had been renovated past regulation, which in turn influenced more high-budget rental builds that push low-income people out. The sacrifice of the lower class is a recurring theme in American history. But in the 90s, the aggressive hyper-capitalism that created behemoths like Wal-Mart, Disney, and Coca-Cola were growing in political and social influence more than ever before. For example, by 1992, the same year that Hillary Clinton ended her 6-year run on the Wal-Mart board of directors, there were 1,735 Wal-Mart stores in 42 states. While owner Sam Walton, who died the same year, was worth $23 billion by this time, 40% of his workers were part-time, ununionized laborers living at or below the poverty line. Studies found that each new Walmart store lowered area pay rates, shrank the area job market by an average of 150, and ultimately cost local governments more by straining welfare services, healthcare needs, and infrastructure. Meanwhile, the Walton family would use their private fortunes to lobby for changes to tax law, like trying to repeal the estate tax and supporting the privatization of education and rejecting universal health care. Though the Clinton administration could boast about the creation of 18 million new jobs between 1993 and 1997, the reality was less impressive. Yes, unemployment dropped below 6% in 1994 for the first time in 2 administrations, and by April 2000 it was under 4%. But while computer and data processing jobs added approximately 1 million jobs during the decade, most of the available positions were low-paid and non-unionized jobs in cities with rising rents and cost of living. They were mostly fast food and retail. Like Wal-Mart closed the 90s with just under 4,000 stores, with 1.14 million employees who would be impacted by Walton family lobbying. The redundancy and exploitation of McJobs, a term created by Douglas Copeland, was fictionalized in films like Slacker, Singles, Reality Bites, and Clerks. The desire to reject consumerism and target marketing, while still being susceptible to it, would be a key theme of Generation X's disillusion, which will be lots of fun to talk about in episode 4 of this series. But even if you were full of angst, you still needed money. A 1997 bump in minimum wage from $4.75 to $5.15 was the fourth and last of the decade. So while there was a bump in disposable income for many, by the end of the decade, the average CEO was making 300 times as much as the average worker, while housing, education, and healthcare costs began to permanently rise. But still, you were employed.
Hey, isn't that Calvin? I haven't seen him for a while. Me either. Wonder where he's headed. I've heard he got a job. Is that right? Yes. Well, it's about time he got himself together. You know, now that you mention it, there is something different about him. Just goes to show you can't judge a book by its cover. Looks like responsibility's been good for him. Well, I'm just glad somebody believed in him enough to give him a chance. Wonder where he's working.
Welcome to McDonald's. May I help you?
While the size of the middle class had grown, over 36.5 million Americans were living under the poverty line in 1996, and most of them were concentrated in cities. The growing wealth gap was illustrated further by housing. In 1991, it was reported that 27 million Americans, or almost a third of the population, was shelter poor, and approximately 250,000 were homeless at any given moment. These 27 million Americans were at risk of being unable to meet basic needs because of high housing costs. Thanks to deregulation of rent in the private sector, affordable housing was getting pricier. For the thriving upper middle class, though, a new sign of wealth was the McMansion, which became a staple in suburban neighborhoods. Described the New York Times, the new luxury houses have features that were once only found on true estates, like columned entrances and two-story foyers with marble floors and dramatic curving staircases. They often include a great room, an oversized eat-in kitchen that opens into a family room, and bathrooms with his and her dressing rooms, double-sized whirlpool tubs, and steam showers. 3-car garages are standard. An early 90s report on housing trends predicted rising home costs and that more house building companies would be building more large and luxurious homes with smaller yards and slower appreciation rates to meet the demands of boomers trading up from their first homes. While home square footages soared, the average lot size shrunk from 10,000 to 8,000 square feet, thanks to builders pressuring local municipalities to lower minimum lot sizes. To accommodate a lower income group of Americans who still desired home ownership despite the rising prices, the manufactured home industry grew. They were touted as a distinctly different thing from trailer homes, but also a cheaper alternative to traditional homes. Sales jumped from 171,000 in 1991 to 363,000 in 1996, representing 1 in 3 single-family homes sold. The average cost of $36,300 to build a manufactured home was much more seductive for some people than an average of $119,000 for a traditional home. And plus, the manufactured homes had some enviable features. Detailed the Christian Science Monitor on a manufactured home in Atlanta. Her white painted double wide with blue-gray shutters has 4 bedrooms, a kitchen, living room, dining room, and laundry area. One of the 2 spacious bathrooms has a large sunken tub and skylight. Her side deck and neatly manicured yard are lined with pink and purple petunias. Despite extensive and restrictive rules in manufactured home neighborhoods designed to set them apart from trailer parks, manufactured homes were still stigmatized and weren't a solution. In June 1995, Clinton announced the National Home Ownership Strategy, which he hoped would encourage 2-parent households. The strategy listed 100 things the administration wanted to do to boost home ownership, like easy mortgages, refinancing, and access for lenders to financial markets. He signed the Community Reinvestment Act, which was credited with increasing the percentage of Americans who own homes from 64% to 67.4%, temporarily benefiting Black people and Latinos. The problem was that borrowers who were ineligible for low-interest prime loans were encouraged to take vicious subprime loans from unforgiving banks. Additionally, easy credit raised house prices, and some people ended up in debt with bad interest rates. The bulk of these consequences would not be felt until the 2008 recession.